Hi there, and welcome back to the Skate Podcast. This is episode 385. Bridget Scott and myself previously recorded an entire episode breaking down the last two games between the Boston Bruins and Columbus Blue Jackets. But of course, in typical Skate Podcast fashion, breaking news took place after our recording, pertinent to a lot of what we talked about. So, Bridget Scott, Fabian Lysell, after his first NHL game, has gotten sent back down to the Providence Bruins as we record here on Sunday afternoon. Let's get right into it.
Can I start? Because I'm pissed. I'm irrationally angry right now because this is going to cause me about 7 more hours of work because my computer sucks and I have to cut these videos together. But anyway, it also, our opinions still stand on what we think about Lysell. None of us think he should have been sent down this quickly. I don't think any of us thought he played poorly in the game. So I think we could probably say right off the top, this is a decision that we disagree with. Not on top of the fact that it's creating more work for us again. I don't understand it. You can listen to the following episode as to why we think he should have stayed. And I don't know, it's disappointing because I think that it could have done something for his confidence to stay up. He could have probably learned more. They would have had more options offensively. The third line, is it better without him? With him, who knows? But I at least think that you can't call the kid up for 11 minutes. And I assume that our listeners are probably in the same boat, thinking that it's fast. It was 24 hours. I don't know.
Yeah, so I will say right off the top, it is possible that they call him back up before Tuesday's game. That said, I would lean towards that being unlikely because they don't usually send out press releases for quote-unquote paper transactions, which are moves where a guy is sent down but doesn't really have to report, and then he comes back up the next day, and basically you just bank some cap space for that day by having them technically in the AHL, even though they're still with the NHL team. They don't usually send out press releases when they do that, and this one did get a press release, so my guess is it is closer to a permanent move than a temporary one-day move. So it's odd. It feels to me like they already had their mind made up even before the call up that it was just going to be a one game thing, which I just don't think is really the right way to go about this. If you call a kid up, and yes, look, regardless, it is a nice reward for Fabian Lysell, who had been playing well, to make his NHL debut and to get to do it while his family is all in town and gets to see it. This doesn't change the fact that Saturday night was a special moment for Fabian Lysell and his family. But I think you have to give him a chance to either earn or lose a spot. And I just don't know if 11 minutes in one game is really enough to do that, especially because, as you're going to hear us say in the full episode to follow, he brought more to that third line than Oliver Wahlstrom did. That's not to say that he was amazing or that line was great, but they did score, and he was a big part of setting that goal up. And just in general, that line had been underwater the previous 3 games, and at least, kept their head above water in Saturday's game.
Well, Bridget, you think you're pissed off now? Wait until Monday when this episode releases, and they have since called him back up, and we will have to do a third rendition of this episode and more. I'm just kidding. I don't want to get you all upset. But
Ryan, ready to flow.
Now they're gonna call. So it's 3:30 now that we're recording.
They're gonna call it Poitras.
They're gonna call it Matt Poitras at 6 p.m.
I swear to God, guys, I'm not redoing it a third time. Not doing it.
Look, at a certain point in time, we can't record the podcast on every time there's breaking news.
Have you guys ever seen the old SNL skit? Dana Carvey does he's playing Dan Rather, and he does pre-tapes for the news because he's going on vacation for 2 weeks. So they want to like pre-tape like every possible breaking story, and they just get like more and more ridiculous as they go. And he's like, he's not going to be eaten by a lion. And they're like, well, what if he is? we should just do that. We should just like pre-tape a bunch of potential breaking news.
So, yeah, congratulations to Matt Poitras on the call up. Really, no.
Yeah, I mean, look, guys, I'm not sure how the trade between Marsh and for Kreider is going to work out for the Bruins, but we can only see. No, that's a little too. Okay, no, we won't go that far. But look, let me just ask this: like, if they intended on,
I have to correct myself. It was Tom Brokaw pre-tapes, not Dan Rather. Very, very important note.
Very important distinction. Look, let me just ask you guys: if they intended on sending it back down, within 24 hours, why the call up in the first place? Simply for a reward, a bit of a tease? Like, I mean, what's the? I just don't get it. That's a lot of work to bring up a guy for a third line for 11 minutes. Why? What's the purpose here?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that is what it was. It was just a reward to make his NHL debut, and I don't know, bring a little bit of something different. Second night of a back-to-back after a bad loss. Like I said, it seems like they had their mind made up ahead of time that it was just going to be a one-game thing.
Like, are they serious about him? Like, if you're serious about him at all, like, one game, like 11, that's ridiculous. Like, if you're serious about giving him a chance, if you're serious about him as a prospect, what makes him, less of an option there than Wahlstrom? Like, and this is angry me, so I'll just say, like, I'm for waiving Wahlstrom rather than sending down Fabian Lysell, but that's not what happened. So,
well, Scott, when you say you think it might be predetermined, I guess I'll ask you a two-part question. Number one, why would it be predetermined? And number two, like, if you're saying, and I'm not trying to, pin you to this, but hypothetically, let's say it was predetermined. So if he went out there and scored 2 goals, would they have sent him back down?
Yeah. So I guess, like, I should clarify, like, within reason, I guess. Like, obviously, if he comes up and scores multiple goals or has 3 points or something, like, you're going to have to give him another game. So I guess what I mean is, like, unless he blew them away, he was probably going back. And again, like, good first shift, helps set up a goal. As you can hear us say, like, pretty quiet rest of the game. No shot attempts. Never mind shots on goals. So, look, he didn't blow them away. So if that was the standard, then he didn't reach it. But I just don't think that should have been the standard. Like, the standard should be like, did you show some encouraging signs and earn a second game? And to that, I would say I thought he did.
That's just unrealistic. Like, oh, he needs a hat trick. Like, no, like, expectations should have been low. It should have been about not having any egregious mistakes and trying to get your footing, like, in your first ever NHL game. I don't know, something about the way they've handled him this whole time, like, it just kind of adds up with, and not saying like he deserves it just for being a first round pick or anything, but like, there's been a few times where you feel like he deserves a reward, and then, like, I guess this is a kind of a reward, but it's also kind of a slap in the face. Like, oh yeah, like, there's nothing you could have done to actually reach the NHL, like, and stay in the NHL because we were going to send you down. I don't know. Maybe I'm just in a bad mood.
I just don't know what third line combination is so good that they have to send them back down right now. Like, what are you trying to get back to? Wahlstrom, Brazeau, Frederick, and maybe, guys, I'm not trying to throw gasoline onto a fire when there is none, but look, maybe they just don't. Maybe they don't like him that much. Like, I'm not trying to be dramatic or anything, but maybe there's some personality traits where the Bruins just don't really care for his feelings. Like, I'm not saying that they're messing with them to mess with them, but to Bridget's point, like, if you value somebody's morale, emotional morale, and rewarding somebody with games played, like, unless they have unless they were very transparent with him and said, look, Fabian, like, we actually think we're going to call you back up again really soon. Just, bear with us here. Anything short of that, it does kind of seem like they just like, they aren't really concerned about the potential negative mental effects of, of this transaction.
Yeah, I guess I would say, like, I'm also not super concerned about that. To me, like, you're a 21-year-old kid, whether they give you another shot or not, like, you just got to keep working and force their hand. So he can do that in Providence as well as Boston. So, like, I'm also not worried about that, because I think you need to be much more mentally tough than that to stick in the NHL anyways. What I am concerned about is just that I actually thought there was a chance that their lineup was better with him, and I don't think you can really fairly judge that off one game.
They look like they're going out of their way to send him back. Like they were it's like they were searching for reasons to not let him stick. I mean, he directly impacted the team getting off to a good start in a game that they needed to win. Why is that met with being sent back down to the minors? And look, Scott, like, I'm trying to pull up, my internet sucks right now, but Fabian has had, like, here we go. Providence Bruins 23-24. So last season he had 50 points in 56 games. I mean, obviously a bit of a slower start this year, but like, if you're him and you're driving down 95, right? You're thinking to yourself, I have proven myself a lot of times throughout my professional career in the minors. I know there's still consistency issues and stuff, but when you're the one that's making those drives, and you're always at those Providence Bruins practices and games, and we aren't seeing all those, but he's been living it. As somebody who's been living it, he's probably thinking to himself, I've done enough to earn more than one game after 3 years, and I get sent right back down, even if there's still more to be learned along the way. I don't know. It just seems like a careless handling of the situation, and maybe they're calling him right back up, but without knowing information, I just don't get it. Like, they won the game last night. There's the old adage, don't mess with the winning lineup. They won the game. Like, roll it back for another game. What's the harm?
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, like, I know it's like, Scott, you're saying, like, you got to be mentally tougher. I agree. Like, you have to have the ability to go do your job no matter what the situation is. But at the same time, like, there's a human part of it where you're just thinking to yourself, like, it took me so long to get here. Do I have to wait that long again? Like, maybe it lights a fire, but that's just not how it works all the time. And I just disagree with the decision. And the rest of the podcast, we'll talk about exactly why we thought he should have been there and stayed in the lineup. I mean, we even thought he could stick long term, but look at us. Look how stupid we are.
I'm just looking at Bridget, the I don't know if it's still up, but from the skate pod, we tweeted out that video, and the caption is, did Fabian Lysell do enough to stay there? And then a minute later, he gets sent
I'm
down.
just gonna go delete that because I had it set to post.
I think it's still valid. It was Scott's opinion, and he said that he should have.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you should leave it up. That went up before they made the announcement anyways.
No, it went up just now, but it was scheduled. I scheduled this to post before pre-announcement.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
That might be the ultimate. I gotta
somehow reel in the other one.
That might be the ultimate skate pod breaking news moment. Literally having the account post a clip of Scott answering a question that got answered 30 seconds later. Like, just insane.
I don't know if anything will be worse than when Cassidy got fired, though, while we were recording. Or like,
oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that was a bad one. That one might take the cake. But hey, this is at least like the fourth or fifth time. So
yeah, and I was gonna say, and I do feel like I often like to just tease Bridget, but I do actually feel bad this time because this one's actually worse because Bridget did all the editing and like scheduling to post, and
it's all scheduled. All the commercials are put in. All the social media clips were cut.
No one really cares. People don't really care, but like it would have been better had this happened like 3 minutes after we were done recording. Instead, it happened like 2 hours or whatever, 3 hours later.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not happy. I'm not happy.
Well,
I'll remember.
Don't get too high in the highs, too low in the lows. You know, one thing at a time. Any final thoughts from the two of you before we go to the rest of the episode?
No, you're doing it for the listeners, Bridget. It's all for love of the listeners.
I have other jobs, guys. You know, I was doing other work. Yeah. I did not get Sunday off. This is the most work I've done in a while. So, all right.
We'll let you get to it, Bridget, and then for everybody else, enjoy the rest of episode 385. Welcome into episode 385 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian D. Felice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, the Bruins and Columbus Blue Jackets exchanged victories over the weekend post-Christmas. They fall to the Blue Jackets 6-2 in Columbus, and then they get a 4-0 win at home. Some NHL debuts to talk about, some individual performances to talk about, team performance. Bridget, Scott, let's get right into our opening shifts.
Yeah, and I'll take that NHL debut, which came from Fabian Lysell on Saturday. You know, I think obviously a moment that, you know, Bruins fans have been wondering, like, when is this going to happen? You know, is he going to break through? I'm sure Lysell would have wanted it to come sooner. I don't know about you guys, but was kind of a little bit surprising, only because I think we had spent so much time talking about how Matt Poitras tearing it up down in Providence. And so naturally you kind of think, because he also already has an NHL experience, maybe he would have been the first one up from, you know, that group of talented young players of Poitras, Lysell, throw Georgi Merkulov in if you want. All of whom have been playing well in Providence. You know, Lysell got off to a slow start down there, 4 points in his first 11 games, but 13 in the last 15 prior to this call-up. And, you know, Joe Sacco said, you know, was asked, like, is this basically a response to the blowout loss on Friday, you know, kind of shake things up? And he acknowledged, you know, that's part of it, but part of it was also rewarding Lysell for some good play. You know, he just had a 3-point night on Friday in Providence's games. So, and, you know, and it makes sense because you look at where they put him in the lineup on that third line with Trent Frederic and Justin Brazeau. Oliver Wahlstrom had been on that line the previous 3 games, and that line just really didn't give you anything. And, you know, they wanted to keep Coyle on the second line if they could. So you have to try something else with that third line because you were getting really absolutely nothing from it. And Lysell brings an element of speed that line didn't have otherwise. So, you know, his debut got off to a perfect start. He doesn't factor in on the score sheet, but helps create the opening goal of the game with some good work down low, moves it to Brazeau, and then goes to the front of the net, and he's right there kind of causing some chaos. Doesn't get a touch, but Brazeau pokes in a rebound. And, you know, I'd say a little quiet from there on out in terms of his game. Minutes cut back a bit as the game went on. He was skipped on some shifts. But, you know, he had his parents in attendance. His sister was there. They were all out for the holidays, so that timing-wise worked out really well for him. And, you know, I think we'll definitely be getting more into just what we saw from him and how long we think he might hang around.
I'm going to call an audible and just talk about Lysell and not do an opening shift because I feel like maybe this is just a good spot to start. Just because I think this was the more interesting thing that came out.
Bridget just single-handedly deciding to
I'm sorry.
change up the podcast.
Yep, I was in the huddle and I was like, nope, we're changing the play. But so he didn't know when we talked to him after the game, he said he didn't know when he woke up that he was going to end up in Boston that day. He got a call at some point during the day, realized he was making his debut. Lucky that his parents hadn't left town yet because I think they're leaving today, which is Sunday, and his sister as well. But he on that first shift, he kind of just causes the puck to not land anywhere in particular. Like I think he lifts a stick and like it just kind of bouncing around, and it gave Brazeau time to find it and put it in, and it was just kind of like chaos in general. So he was out on the top of the crease, and he was causing a distraction. They originally had him with an assist, but they took it away because I do think it never touched him, but he was involved either way. And in terms of like his call up and having, rewarding him for what he's been doing down in Providence, Sacco said that was the reason for the call up, but not necessarily just the points, though his points have been coming more frequently. It also had a lot to do with just the way that he's playing away from the puck and some other details in his game that they've been noticing have gotten better, especially since training camp. That's what they told him to go down and work on. Because I think it was you, Scott, that asked pregame the question about like, what was your impression of him in training camp? And they said, his offense, or Sacco said his offense was there, but he seems to have gained some confidence in his play away from the puck and starting to do the right things. So I was kind of trying to notice that throughout the game, not just his offense and his speed, which I do think he helped that line's transition game. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on what he was doing when he wasn't, shooting, because he didn't have a shot on goal. If you look at his stat line, it's a very unimpressive stat line. But if you didn't watch the game and you just looked it up to see how he did, like you wouldn't get the whole story of what happened with him, because I didn't notice really too many defensive breakdowns. I mean, there were a few mistakes, but nothing so significant that I'm like going into my notes and writing like, oh, that was bad. This stood out as a negative, but because I think he had a pretty solid game, and factoring in on the first goal, which is really important in a bounce back game, because they obviously didn't play their best against Columbus, and they come back, they score first. It kind of set things off in the right direction. Brian, what did you think of his first NHL game? Was it good enough for him to stick around?
Well, that's the main metric I'll just use here, because in what do you have, just over 11 minutes of ice time, it's not a whole lot to go off of. And what I would just simply say is I think he played well enough to earn another game. I think, again, when your ice time is mitigated for different reasons, there's only so much opportunity to even show what you can do. But like you said, Bridget, he helps the team get off on the right foot. You're coming off of a no-show performance in Columbus after the holiday, and yeah, he's hard on the forecheck on that first goal. Takes the puck wide with speed, gets behind the net, gets himself involved, and it leads directly to the Brazeau goal, like you mentioned. So, after that, again, I think Scott said, nothing crazy that jumped off of the page, but in his first game where he found out the day of, he was playing in it. I mean, you're talking about a kid that got drafted, what was it, 3 years ago now, that's been scratching and clawing for this opportunity, probably thinking many times before he should have been called up, never did. And then just randomly, day of, gets a call up. So you're dealing with all those emotions. Okay, shit, got to get my parents to the game now. A lot of things going on in his head before the game, probably, and not a lot of time. So I think he handled the moment well, and I think he earned another opportunity.
Yeah, and sometimes with like this kind of call up, when the Bruins are on a back-to-back, you think maybe part of it is fresh legs, but he didn't really have fresh legs because he also played a game Friday night. So he was in the same situation as everyone else in that respect. Yeah, I would say the one big negative play that stood out was he had a turnover on the breakout coming out of the zone where he was just not moving fast enough and got his pocket picked. But that was really the only one that stood out. And I feel like that's, that can be like a learning moment if you use it right. Is, hey, like that, there's example A of NHL being faster than AHL, right? Like he probably in the AHL, he probably has time to hold on to that puck, survey the ice, make a play. In the NHL, guy closes on you much quicker. So, that was one. Yeah, he should get another game. Like if you called him up just for one game to give him 11 minutes. And, again, like, unless it's a complete disaster and it's like, oh, wow, he's really not ready. I think you have to give him, at least a couple games. Like that would seem kind of weird otherwise to me.
There's no reason for them to, be like, oh no, we want to get Wahlstrom back in there. Like, I don't think Wahlstrom's in his way if he's earning his ice time, because I don't know if Wahlstrom's really earned his spot. Obviously he's kind of a guy that they kind of were hoping panned out to something, picking him up off waivers from the Islanders, but who knows what his role is going to be on the team yet. I don't know exactly how they're going to use him, or if he's going to end up like Tyler Johnson. But obviously Lysell does add something to your power play. Wahlstrom was also getting some power play time, but they're different style players. Lysell was getting time, and we can talk about the power play units later, but in the two units that were like half and half, like the top unit split. But so he brings something that Wahlstrom isn't necessarily going to bring with his speed. And I don't think that you should be considering Wahlstrom as like an obstacle to keeping him in, because I don't think he's earned it. So the issue is, and because we've talked so much about, was Matt Poitras going to come up? Like, if Lysell comes in and holds on to a spot, like that more than likely would have been like, it's the same spot that Poitras would have come back to take on the third line. So yeah, it's interesting to see like the dynamic. We talked about this before the break, maybe 2-3 weeks ago, guys. Like, was it time to call up Lysell and just give him a chance? And there's been several times during the season it seemed like it would make sense to call him up, especially when their offense was stagnant and their power play was stagnant. Were you surprised at all by the timing of it coming? Like, obviously it was after a loss, but it didn't seem as urgent, and then he gets the call. I don't know. It was a good change of pace for us to actually have something else to talk about. I mean, it was a good win for them, but it was against a bad team. So yeah, Lysell definitely made it more interesting to just follow and just, pay attention to the details when he was out there.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like I was a little surprised only because I probably would have thought Poitras was ahead of him. And I actually, like, I don't think he blocks Poitras, because I think, you sub in Lysell for Wahlstrom on that line, but it still doesn't address what I think is the biggest problem with that third line right now, which is Trent Frederic just isn't playing well enough to be a center on a third line. Like, you can maybe hide him on a wing, but you're like, I mean, quite frankly, I just think he's dragging the line down. Like, you can't have a center playing as poorly as Trent Frederic has been playing for a while now. And
I don't disagree with that at all. I completely agree with that.
Like, I think Lysell provided more of a spark to that line than Wahlstrom had, but that's like addressing like the number 2 issue on the line. Like, the number 1 issue is Trent Frederic just shouldn't be centering your third line right now. Maybe he can find it on the wing, but like, that's why I still think it's why I would have thought Poitras would have been the one coming up. And it's why I still think there's a spot for him, because whether it's Poitras comes in and Frederic bumps to the left wing, or even Frederic comes out of the lineup and watches for a couple games, or him or Brazeau go down to the fourth line. Like, there's still room there, because you still don't have a great third line. So you should still be looking for ways to improve that. Clearly they want to keep, at least for the time being, Coyle up on the second line on the wing, and which I get, because that line has looked pretty good for the most part. And Saiko has been able to use them as kind of a bit of a matchup shutdown line. When you throw 3 really responsible two-way players there. But I think the third line still needs more tweaking, even beyond just putting Lysell there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Trent Frederic's played well enough to be a player on this team anywhere in the lineup so far for much of this season, let alone center on the third line. I mean, he's got 0 points in his last 9 games, and that's the least of my criticisms about his game. He's got 5 points in his last 19. again, the least of my criticisms about him. It's what he's doing without the puck or without when he's not scoring, which is rarely ever. He's a team worst -13 on the season. I know there's a lot of debate about how valuable is a plus-minus stat line. Well, I'm not going to argue that, but I'm just going to point out the fact that he's a -13. He's the worst on the team. So it's not good. Not good at all.
Yeah. So, I don't know, I guess so. Let's talk about like how long you think Lysell should get here, because I think we all agree at least one more game. But could you see this being like a long term? Like he's maybe not necessarily like here to stay, but 10 plus games type thing, or does this feel like like around this time last year? That's when Georgi Merkulov came up, got a few games, limited minutes, not really the best role. And it was like just kind of a taste, and then he went back down. Like, what do you guys think this is? Is this he just gets a taste and goes back down, or could he really stick around and be here like longer term?
I think there's a pathway for him to be here longer term because there is an opening on that line. It's not like they're waiting for someone to come back from injury and he's just filling in temporarily. Like there's a spot to be taken, and if he plays better than Wahlstrom can play there, or just does enough to make it worth the team's while to have him there, which would obviously involve actually scoring, getting more shots, because like we mentioned, he didn't have a single shot on goal. Like he didn't have the opportunity really to use his shot the way that like that part of his skill set, which everybody knows is his most dangerous skill set. There's certainly a way that he stays here longer, because it's not like anybody has won that job yet. I think it's still up for grabs. And if he does what they want him to do and doesn't look behind the NHL speed, like, and I don't mean that in like I know he's fast. Like I'm not talking about actual foot speed. I'm talking about like his thinking the game and his, the plays he's making. Is he able to do that at an NHL setting rather than an AHL setting? He could be here longer, as long as he doesn't have some like a stretch where he goes too quiet. Doesn't seem like he's helping. If his attitude is good and he's adding a spark to that line, I feel like he's got all the opportunity in the world to run with it. And obviously that's what they're hoping for.
I think he absolutely can stay longer. I think what I don't want to see happen is what we saw happen with Georgi Merkulov a year ago, where the Bruins give him a couple of games with limited minutes, and that's kind of all the look he gets. Because I think the difference between Lysell and Merkulov is, as it pertains to an NHL opportunity, Georgi Merkulov, so far to my eyes, does not have breakaway separation speed at the NHL level to do what he does at the NHL level that he does at the AHL level. Fabian Lysell, I do believe, has the natural foot speed to do at the NHL level what he's done at the AHL level, but it's going to take some time. It's going to take some seasoning. And there's only one way to really do that. It's more NHL games. So I think that for that concept alone, the Bruins should be willing to reward him if he earns it. Like I think he earned it in that Columbus game. I think he earned another look. If he didn't, I wouldn't be saying it. So and the other side of it too is, tell me who on this Bruins roster, specifically in the bottom six, we'll say right now, or even the middle six, like who really has cemented their stance to just be there constantly. Like you look at, we talked about Trent Frederic briefly, and I know there's some positional differences here, but Trent Frederic has not played well. Justin Brazeau, 16 points in 36 games. I think that's good for him, right? Nobody really knew who he was last year. But if you were to put him on a fourth line role, would anybody be too upset about that? Like I look at a guy like Johnny Beecher and Cole Koepke, and I like them, but should their fourth line roles be safe night to night? Has Johnny Beecher been an impactful guy night to night? I think he's been okay to what his role is, but I think there shouldn't be, comfortability there. Like, could you slide Brazeau down to the wing? I know Beecher plays center, but Kaslik plays center and Beecher plays wing too. So there's versatility there. All I'm saying is, if you have Lysell on a third line and you bring up a Poitras or a Merkulov, but let's just say Poitras. Say you have Poitras and Lysell on that third line with a bigger body. That fourth line doesn't have to be safe. You could slide a Brazeau down to that fourth line. Like, people have to continue to earn their spots. Wahlstrom thought he had a good game in Edmonton, his first game as a Bruin. You know, he has struggled to match that performance so far in games to come. So I just think the Bruins should be willing to help improve this roster as they go. And there's so much talk about they gotta go out and get somebody, and I don't disagree with that, as long as it doesn't cost them first round picks or whatnot. But you owe it to yourself as an organization to see what you have internally. When you have some players down in Providence that are on the cusp, give them the look. And if that means that some of the guys in Boston have to sit for a couple of games, or maybe they get waived, then so be it, because it's a business. And so I think the Bruins are seeing that right now, that they need to be willing to do this. And hopefully what we're seeing last night with Lysell being called up, Bridget, you asked, was it a surprise? I was a bit surprised, because I think there's been times in the past where Lysell could have gotten called up. He had like 57 points in 60 games in Providence last year, the year before, and like, he's never gotten that call up. So I was starting to lose faith that he would ever get called up. So we'll see what happens here.
I'm a little worried that they the Bruins mishandle it, and like, he has like, say, 3 good games or decent games where you're like, okay, no, he should still stick around, and then they send him down and he loses confidence again, because if you want to reward a player for doing well in Providence, then you also have to reward a player for holding up their end of the bargain when they're here, and not send them down prematurely and have them have some sort of bitter taste in their mouth. And I know it's a business as well, right? It's a business on that side too, where you have to be able to cope with whatever emotions you're feeling about being sent down that are negative, but you don't want to create that unnecessarily, and you want to give him as many games as he can to adapt to the NHL, so that he and I've had this happen in my job too, so I completely understand this. Like, you want to be able to work through stuff, because there's no other way to learn from it, right? Like, you get coaching, you say, okay, let me get one more game to get out there and show you that I can do it the right way. And I just hope he gets a fair shot, right? We'll come on here and say, oh, he didn't do enough, or, he made a bad mistake. Maybe he needs to go back and work on XYZ in Providence. Like, we'll say that if that happens, but hopefully we're not at some point in the next few weeks sitting here going, well, I don't really know why he got sent down. Like, when they clearly could use offense, the power play could use help, and just wanting to see him get rewarded if he's playing well enough.
Yeah, and we'll see if he earns that. Like, again, game 1, I would say encouraging, good enough to get a second look, but like, not like it was great. I mean, Bridget, you mentioned it, not just 0 shots on goal, but 0 shot attempts. Like, he's gonna have to be more involved. So we'll see if he does that. Just a couple other roster notes here while we're talking about guys potentially coming in and out or up and down. As of right now, Lysell is the only one who could be sent down without waivers, because Mark McLaughlin played his 10th game since the last time he cleared waivers, when he went in on Saturday. So McLaughlin would now require waivers. Everyone else requires waivers. So they're in kind of a little bit of an interesting spot where they are at the maximum roster numbers. So if Poitras or someone else came up, like, they either would have to waive someone or would have to send Lysell down. So, like, Oliver Wahlstrom is going to be interesting to see what their plan is for him now. Like, this is sort of what I mentioned as my concern when they grabbed him off waivers, was like, I think this is going to be a project. And I just wondered, are they really going to have the patience? And here we are after like one good game and a few quiet games, and it's like they're already calling up Fabian Lysell to take his place. And it's like, I just like, if they're gonna waive Oliver Wahlstrom here in the next week or so, it's like, yeah, what did you expect? Like, it was gonna take more patience than that.
Well, and that's Right. And when we talked about that, Scott, I'm sitting here saying at the time, well, Wahlstrom has, whatever he has, like, I forget the number, but he's proven that he could score at the NHL level. He's got over 200 games to his name. I don't know, maybe it was something like 77 points or something like that in his like 200 plus games. I don't really remember exactly what it was. Maybe it was less than that. Regardless, it was more than the other guys in Providence had done. And I wasn't saying that because I didn't want to see the guys from Providence and Boston. I just didn't think the Bruins were going to call them up, right? Like, I knew Poitras eventually, but I didn't see them calling up Lysell or Merkulov because I just got instinct, but clearly it was wrong. So now I'm sitting here a few weeks later saying,
it was also because they were out on the Western road trip too. So we're like, are they going to call him up like all the way out to the west, like to the west right now? But like the Wahlstrom thing, maybe they should have just passed on him and brought Lysell up earlier or Poitras up earlier, because Patra's been playing really well too. He had another goal. It was an empty netter, but he had another goal on Saturday as well, and so did Merkulov. So like there was a reason enough, and we talked about it, to call someone up back then instead of adding Wahlstrom. And now if they waive Wahlstrom, Scott, can't the Islanders just take him back?
Yeah, I don't know what the number of games are. Like he might go back on full waivers. I forget / don't really know exactly how that works. He might have already passed the time period for Islanders to have first dibs again.
So in that case, maybe he goes back if no one picks him up this time. Like maybe you can continue the project in Providence. That's probably the best case scenario.
Well, I would assume the Islanders would claim him. I just don't know if someone else would put in a claim before them, I guess.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if Wahlstrom went through waivers and ended up in Providence, which is kind of what the point I was trying to make, which is like if you had these plans potentially of bringing up Lysell or others, I don't know why they got him in the first place. I mean, I thought they brought in Wahlstrom because I thought that was indicative of they weren't going to call up anybody anytime soon. They thought that he was the better play. And then here we are, like I said, a week and a half later. So anyway, look, I think it's a good thing. I don't think necessarily having these options is a bad thing because you're kind of putting guys like Trent Frederic and others on notice. And look, I still think there's decisions to be made there. Scott, I know you're under the impression the Bruins aren't in any rush to trade Trent Frederic, and I'm not here to disagree with that. But what I would say is park his ass on the 9th floor if he's going to keep playing like this. Like I don't know what else to really say, but like what can the Bruins do? What can he do to snap him out of this? Like to me, I feel like I'm watching a player who has one foot out the door, and that might be unfair, but I know what Trent Frederic looks like when he's engaged, and he is not engaged. And I don't know if he's feeling the pressure of playing like shit in a contract year. I don't know if his heart is already in free agency, maybe wanting to go back to St. Louis. Like, I don't know what the deal is with him, but he's a player who thrives on playing with passion and energy. And when he's physically and emotionally engaged, you see how he impacts the game. That is not the player that I've been seeing this year, 95+% of the time. And unfortunately, I have no choice but to say he looks like a player with one foot at the door because his play is giving me no reason to not say that. I don't know how you guys feel about him or what the Bruins can do or he can do to get himself back on track, but this doesn't seem like a situation where he's just going to snap into it. I don't know what the deal is, but I think he has to sit.
Well, I feel like there's been other guys who are like, okay, this was a slow start for Geeky. Geeky's not playing well, and then he corrects it and he starts playing really well. He scored again last game on Saturday. And then
Bridget, can I just say real quick to that point? Just Geeky is on pace right now for the same amount of points and the same amount of games as last year. I think last year he had 39 points in 76 games, and this year he's on pace for like 36 or 7 points in 77 games. So to your point about players picking it back up.
Yeah, it's like I want my spot in the lineup. I am bringing up the intensity, and I'm gonna get myself right. And so Geeky gets right. There's been times there was earlier in the season we thought, Zacha needed to pick it up. He's had stretches where he has. Coyle looks better now in the situation he's in the top 6. on that line with Marchand. So some of the guys who haven't been scoring, hadn't been producing, they are. And then you look around to the lineup to see who's still not. And Trent Frederic is the obvious one that hasn't turned the corner when some of these other guys have. And when you ask Brian, like, who's safe in the bottom six, I would say, like, to me, the only two people that I wouldn't want to see and come out really or don't deserve to is like Brazeau and Kastelik, and everyone else I think is fair game to move them around.
Yeah.
Either move them to a different line or healthy scratch.
Well, yeah, and to tie both of your points together, like, yeah, Morgan Geekie got off to a slow start and has picked it up, and he got healthy scratched 5 times in between as part of that process.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Brazeau got off to a slow start, was healthy scratched twice. Mason Laura has been healthy scratched a few times. Like, other guys who were struggling and needed a reset, in part, got it by being put on level 9 to watch for a couple games. So, yeah, I think you are like pretty much there with Frederick. The complication, as I highlighted earlier, is like, okay, you take Frederick out. Who is your third line center? Obviously, you just move Coyle back, but that splits up a line that I think Sacco otherwise likes right now. Again, you can't call Poitras up unless you're waiving someone or sending Lysell right back. So, there's like a little bit of a conundrum here. But
didn't you just move Kastelik there?
I guess, but like, I mean, it might work. It might work better than what you have. I feel like the idea of like a Kastelik Lysell line sounds really funny to me.
Yeah, you're right.
But I don't know. I mean, it could be better than what you have there right now.
That's at least going to have more intense. Like, Kastelik brings the kind of game that Frederick should bring, like that intense style of play, the being hard nosed. I mean, I'm intrigued. I kind of want to. It's just, even if it's just one game, like he. I hate to say it, like, I think it's time to at least one game have him come up to the 9th floor. He can come have popcorn time with Scott for a game, and unless they do it on the road, then he'll miss popcorn time. But yeah, I think it's probably time.
Well, and just to clarify the bottom 6 safe comment, Kastelik and Brazeau, those guys were not in my mind when I mentioned that. They're regulars every game because, I mean, certainly Kastelik, like, he doesn't take a shift off. I was more so thinking about like Beecher and Koepke and just some other guys that rotated.
Which, by the way, Beecher was scratched last night from Laughlin. So, and
he's been scratched before. And guys, I'm telling you, like, if you just keep rolling out Trent Frederic every game with no repercussions, you might see him, have a game or two where he gets in the score sheet like he did against Philadelphia, which was a month ago. Like, you might see that, but you're not going to get that. There is something off with him where it's just not going to click. I think something needs to be done. And Scott, when you mentioned all the guys that have been scratched multiple games, why should he be any different? What has he done at the National Hockey League level to merit like not coming out of the lineup? I mean, David Pastrnak got benched for an entire third period. Come on. Like, so if I saw Trent Frederic out there busting his ass, finishing every check, doing everything he could, then, you wouldn't be hearing me say much about him. I would just be saying, look, it's just not his year. But that's not what I'm seeing. Like I said, the lack of production is the furthest thing from my mind with him right now. Honestly, it's everything that he's not doing. And then those things lead to production. So, yeah, I think he needs to sit. And if he doesn't want, I go back, and we talked about this at the time. When Jim Montgomery got fired, Don Sweeney made that comment, said, we need to figure out who in this locker room does and doesn't want to be a Boston Bruin. And I said at the time, I don't know why he would even say that if there wasn't somebody in that room that he has heard is disgruntled. And my gut instinct at the time was that Trent Frederic may have been one of the guys he's talking about, a pending UFA playing uninspired hockey in a contract year. Maybe there was others. Maybe it wasn't Frederic. But as time goes on here, my gut instinct kind of makes me feel like he might be one of the players that they're trying to figure out. And I don't know. I don't want to spend too much time because how many times on a podcast can we say he's uninspired right now? But he just is. And there's other things to talk about as well. I mean, So I want to get to those things too. But maybe if you guys want to button up any of this middle six talk.
Yeah, no, I think I'm good to move on. Do you guys want to get into the like? I think this is gonna be.
I'll take
Brian's
my opening shift, guys. I'll take my.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think this is gonna kind of be Brian's opening shift if we had done opening shifts, but like the Jekyll and Hyde nature of this team coming out of break with a blowout loss in Columbus and then bounce back with blowout win in Boston, and it's like, okay, so it turns out you can beat the Columbus Blue Jackets and win handily the way you're supposed to. Look, you go through the list of excuses of coming off a break, day of game travel, which they don't usually do during the season, but they had to do because no team could travel on the 26th, so they had to travel Friday morning. But I don't know, like I think Nesson had the stat that like over the last 10 years or whatever, this first game back after the break, the road team actually has like a slight winning record. So to me, like that's not an excuse. Like if that's why they played that poorly Friday, to me it kind of reeks of like a team that was looking for an excuse. That almost thought like, oh yeah, this is going to be a tough one coming back, and like you just get into that mindset going in. Like it, regardless, like it shouldn't happen. The game shouldn't get that out of hand.
Yeah, and look, the regular season, the most important elements of a regular season are a couple of things. Number one, make the playoffs. Number two, end the year as healthy as possible. And number three, end the year playing your best hockey possible heading into the postseason. So, this issue that we're talking about, it's frustrating. If they can rectify this and come April, this isn't an issue, then history will look back and say the first half of the season plus the Bruins had troubles with consistent performances. And that's all it was. If they continue to let this be a trend until April, then they're going to be in danger of not making the playoffs. And if they do make the playoffs, they'll be entering the playoffs as a team that has consistency issues and will probably be bouncing 4 or 5 games. Their record right now is 20, 14, and 4. And as I told you guys before we started recording, 4 of those 14 regulation losses, 8 of them, so over half their regulation losses, have been by 4 or more goals. One of them was 5 goals, and 2 of them were 6 goals plus. So that tells you when this team is disengaged or it's not their night. It's not their night. And there's too many of those nights where they either get blown out or they squeak by and get a good win. But that's not the sign of a strong hockey team. That is the ultimate sign of an average, mediocre hockey team, which, if we're being honest right now, guys, the metrics tell us that the Bruins are just an average hockey team. They don't want to be average. How do they not be average? Well, special teams is a big way. We'll get into that too. But being ready to play every single night is a mentality more so than it is a God-given skill set. And so to me, it's inexcusable that they have so many performances that are they're just getting blown out, even if it's followed up with a win, because it's like, well, then where is this competitiveness most nights?
Not for nothing either. Like the Columbus games, like they lost both of their first games to Columbus, who you mark on the schedule as like this should be a win. Like Columbus isn't the best built team, and obviously, and we didn't really talk about this, but like they were playing their backup goalie. The Bruins beat them 4-0. Like I didn't think their goaltender had the best game. He this season has already had an over 4 goals against average. So he wasn't the best goalie, but it's a good way to gain back your confidence after the loss the night before. But either they've lost some games that you really think like, okay, you should be beating this team. It cost Jim Montgomery his job the first time. If you go back to the first meeting with Columbus that they lost and didn't look great in. So yeah, and Brian, you're more so talking about the playoffs, right? Like we're talking about looking forward to like what indicates that they're going to have success in the playoffs, because as of right now, they seem like they're on track to make the playoffs. I guess like that question will still be it'll still be probably a conversation to the end now, just because.
Oh, Bridget, you muted yourself.
I didn't even touch anything. What the heck? My computer just was like, shut up. So you're talking about the playoffs. You're talking about a team that will probably not feel 100% safe, but maybe will, because of the lack of strength in the Eastern Conference, won't have an issue with making it. And don't look now, but they're 2 points out of the first place spot in the division in the Atlantic, and still points percentage, they're fourth. But like in actual points right now, they're 2 points back from first place in their division. Like that's crazy that they turned it around at least enough to get to that point where that cluster that they're in with Toronto, Florida, Tampa, like they're all within striking distance of each other. We talked about this before. Tampa's playing better, but they haven't played as many games, so they still have some games in hand to use in their advantage. But it's going to depend on if they can straighten out the special team stuff in particular, guys. Like that's been something that across coaching changes, like other things have gotten better, but it just has not.
Well, Scott, you wrote about it.
Yeah, I wrote about this after the Friday night game. Like, Saco takes over, and initially it looked like the penalty kill was getting better. They actually had like a really good stretch there where I think they killed 18 in a row at one point. But it's really come crashing back to earth. After Friday, it was 14 of 24 over, I think it was like their previous 9 games. They did go 3 for 3 on Saturday, so I guess now it's 17 for 27. That's still like for a 10 or 11 game stretch, not nearly good enough. And you know, the problems that they had Friday, it was like guys just winning battles in the slot in front of the net, which to me kind of really just speaks to effort as much as anything. There are structural things you can work on, but like Monahan beating you to a rebound is him just wanting that rebound more. Voronkov getting inside position on Lohrei is just winning a one-on-one battle and then knocking in a rebound. The other one was a little different because Carlo gets his stick slashed in half, which should have been a penalty. Then they're kind of scrambling. He takes Elias Lindholm's stick. Now Lindholm doesn't have a stick. And like Carlo comes out too far to try to help Lindholm and leaves. It was Voronkov again, leaves him open behind him. But yeah, like losing those battles, it's like I feel like that's been the penalty kills issues more than anything. Like they're not giving up a ton of like great seam passes that are leading to these wide open one-time rockets. It's a lot of stuff just at the front of the net that they have to just clean up and be committed to. And like I've talked about how 5-on-5 that under Sacco, that by and large they have done a much better job at preventing high danger chances, preventing those chances at the front. But it's still coming up on the penalty kill as kind of a recurring issue. The power play obviously is it's this whole other thing that just has not been right all season. They finally split up the units on Saturday. Didn't really produce much. They only had 2 chances. But that what had been the top unit with Pastrnak, McAvoy, Marchand, Zacha, Lindholm had only scored 3 times in the previous 23 games. And the second unit had doubled that during that time. They had scored 6 times. So that top unit in particular, like whether those guys are together or apart, and I think they should be apart for now, even beyond Saturday. Like I feel like the Bruins in recent years have done this before where they will split it up, but then like it's only for a game, and then the next practice they go back together. I would keep those guys apart for a little bit here and see if you can get something going, because that top unit just had not earned the right to stay together. Like, there have been, to me, no signs that they were on the verge of a breakthrough or making any progress.
Yeah, there's a I don't know. I think I'm just losing hope in this team's ability to rectify the power play. Look, there's obviously I've said it a million times. I think there's some in zone looks and adjustments that they could make with certain individuals, and there's different transitional play that I think that they should be implementing, and that's coaching. But even if they do those things, like there's just a lack of confidence and execution. Their puck pursuit isn't the greatest beneath the goal lines, retrieving pucks. I mean, when you're in the power play, the obvious is that you're outnumbering your opposition, and in those situations, you should be coming out with the puck. And far too often, even when the Bruins do outnumber the opposition on loose pucks, they're still losing those battles more often than they're winning them. Their battle efforts off of face-offs, those 50-50 pucks, need to be better. So I don't know. I wish I had a simple solution. I wish I could just say it's McAvoy shooting more. I wish I could say it's. I don't really know what to say with this group at this point. You watch other teams that they'll be competing against for playoffs, in Tampa Bay and Florida and Toronto and just in the Atlantic alone. I mean, these teams, they zip the puck around with confidence and knowing they're going to execute. And yeah, it's just not what I'm seeing with the Bruins. There's too much talent for this. I mean, Marchand, Pastrnak, McAvoy alone, like Zacha can control the puck. I don't know, guys. It's just they're 25th in the league, right? 31st in the league in the power play after that first Columbus game, and 25th in the PK. I mean, that's not the sign of a playoff hockey team at all. So they have to improve. We'll see if they do.
I'm happy they split the units up, because when it isn't working, you got to try something new. These were the power play units last game against Columbus. It was the first unit was Pastrnak, Zacha, Brazeau, Geeky, and Lohrei. And then the second unit was Marchand, Elias Lindholm, Coyle, Lysell, and McAvoy. And they had Lysell playing the bumper. He was, kind of moving up and down the slot. And granted, there wasn't a lot of power play time to work with, because they just didn't have a lot of minutes on the power play last game. But I like it. I think maybe Brazeau net front on the same unit as Pastrnak could help open something up. And trying someone different in the bumper with Lysell there maybe changes the dynamic, because Lindholm had been doing it. He's still on that unit, and he can, switch in there if need be. But I don't know if he's been the most effective bumper. So to get him, maybe get him net front or Coyle net front instead provides a different look. And splitting up, Pastrnak and Marchand onto different units, maybe it just creates a different way that you have to defend. I don't know. I'm glad they're trying something different, just because the success hasn't been there. Besides, like Brazeau has been doing what he's supposed to do, but putting him on a unit with Pastrnak doesn't change the fact that maybe Brazeau still keeps scoring, but maybe he also gets a good screen on a pasta shot, or picks up a rebound on a pasta shot, or I think that could be a good combo.
Yeah, and you see what they're doing with. Basically, you're just keeping your top two lines together. Like Pastrnak, Zacha, and Geeky have been good together 5-on-5. Put them together on the power play. Marchand, Lindholm, and Coyle have looked pretty good 5-on-5. Put them on a power play unit. And then fill in around there. I think the best thing the Bruins have had going on the power play has been the Lohrei Brazeau, high to low connection. So keep them together, put them with Pastrnak. That makes a lot of sense to me. I completely get the thinking. And then you fill in that second unit with, or, however you want to call these units, and put McAvoy and Lysell there. Makes sense to me. So I would give it another game, give it some more chances, get a practice in with these groups on Monday, because obviously they didn't practice Saturday. There was no morning skate with the travel. So yeah, as I said, like you have to do something. So I don't know if this works. I don't know if this does anything, but it makes about as much sense as anything else to me right now.
Yeah, and again, regardless of the combinations, if you're not playing on your toes, it's not going to be successful. And Scott, you mentioned the Brazeau-Lorei connection, and I've seen them work on that in practice a lot. Even if it was after practice, you see Brazeau take that pass at the goal line and pivot his hips simultaneously to the front of the net, trying to get that going to the net and getting the puck there and causing chaos. And I think again, that's an element of what you need in a power play. You need to know what you're going to do with the puck before you get it, or at least you need to know what your direct options are going to be. If that look is taken away, okay, this is you get the puck and you stick in the power play and you're holding it for 2, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. You're killing your power play. You're giving penalty killers opportunity to get into position, and your unit's going to be too stationary. So we've talked about it before: constant movement, playing on your toes, playing on the inside of the ice. Again, on the power play, the other team has one less player, so you have more time to make things happen. So you get complacent on the outside. Don't stay on the outside all the time. Get the puck into scoring areas, whether it's with your feet or shots or whatever. And I just think that whatever the combinations are, they need to adopt a mindset change to just playing on your toes and getting the puck to the net, whatever it takes. And then when you do that, find out what seams can open for those pretty plays, because those pretty plays aren't just going to be there if you're not making things happen before them. Even Kucherov, like watch Kucherov in Tampa Bay, like he'll have the puck, but he'll make a play with the puck still on his stick, just with his head. He'll do head fakes and shoulder fakes, and it opens up seams. So even if the Bruins are holding onto the puck, there are ways to hold onto the puck with deception at the same time. So I just think a lot of it comes with confidence. So what comes first, execution or confidence? That's the $1 million question. But also, speaking of Pastrnak, we haven't talked about this. Last time we recorded, he had left the most recent game with an injury, and we weren't sure what the update was post-holiday. He's come back in Columbus and in Boston against Columbus, and I thought he had some good jump, Bridget and Scott.
Yeah, definitely. And he gets 2 breakaway chances Saturday, finishes one of them, beats Tarasov, but hits the post on the other. So, yeah, I thought, I don't know if I'm going to say like he looked fine, because I think we had been talking about how he looks a little off even before he left that Washington game right before the break. But no, I didn't see any like obvious signs of him not, I don't know, of him being hurt, I guess. Like, still thought there were times where maybe he looked a little bit labored, but that had kind of been there already. Like I definitely think he's dealing with something. It's probably been lingering for a while. It's not bad enough to keep him out of the lineup, obviously. I think the fact that he played back-to-back nights is pretty encouraging, and goes over 18 minutes on Saturday as well. You would think if there was any concern at all about something getting worse, or, he didn't feel good after Friday, like, you'd probably hold him out Saturday. And I actually, like, when I saw the Lysell call up, like, I did initially for a second wonder, like, oh, are they going to rest Pastrnak for a game? Not that I thought he got hurt again or anything, but like, were they already planning, he wasn't going to play a back-to-back? I think the fact that he did is encouraging, that this at least isn't anything too serious, but you just hope that whatever it is isn't going to linger and like limit him, all season or for like a long stretch here.
Yeah. No, I saw him like moving his feet and like looking like his first step was good. Like, there were times where you saw him get going. Obviously, like those 2 breakaways, especially when he scored on that McAvoy setup, like he was just way out in front. No one was going to catch him either way. Like, he was way out in front already. He just happened to read it perfectly. Like, okay, puck comes loose. Oh, McAvoy's going to get it. I'm just going to break. And he goes and he scores. And yeah, like that was, I'm glad he finished one. Like there'd been times earlier in the season that he's had multiple breakaways that he didn't bury, and he could have had, probably should have had two against Columbus in that second game of the back-to-back, just because he, like you said, he had Tarasov beat. It just happened to hit the post. The entire crowd reacted like it went in, because it did look like it went in at first. But then you see the replay right away and you're like, oh no, that banged right off the post. But yeah, I mean, even when he's not 100% healthy, he's still finding ways to contribute and be effective. And obviously important to finish that one when he had the chance on the breakaway. So and Swayman, when we talked after the game, someone said you have had to save some, in practice, some breakaways by Pasta, and he's like, hey, what do you do to like stop him? And he's like, you just pray or something like that. Like, because when Pasta's set up in that kind of situation, if you give David Pastrnak a breakaway, like you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, and look, I think we can talk about the top six right now too, because entering the season, I'm not
sorry,
gonna.
Brian, just one last quick note on Pastrnak. He also took a couple pretty good hits Saturday, which I actually think was encouraging to see, because he didn't shy away from contact and he didn't look like any worse for wear after taking them. So, obviously we noticed that the play that stood on the Washington game was, we noticed him pulling up as Tom Wilson's coming down on him, and that wasn't even a hard hit. And like, he clearly just couldn't handle any contact at that point. So to see him take a couple hits and just keep going was also good to see.
Yeah, maybe the rest did him well, because they got a little bit of extra time with the holiday. So, and I don't know if you saw this, but Hampus Lindholm was Santa for Pasternak's daughter and got engaged.
Yeah, on the same day.
Yeah. But and also there was an update on him that he's still out weeks and hasn't started skating yet. And that Sacco said he doesn't know when he's going to start skating again. Well, so he's still a ways away. But
I don't mean to be Sherlock Holmes here, but there was a picture of Hampus proposing down on one knee. I don't know.
How you got to do it, man?
Can he? No, but can he do that if his injury is allowing him not to? I don't know.
Joking aside, like, I think it was actually encouraging in a way, because it's like
I'm being serious.
Yeah, honestly, it's like, at least he can do that. And when the video that Pastrnak posted of him playing Santa, he's like crouched down. So it's like, okay, he can at least do a couple things. Like, he's not skating yet, but like, it's also not like he's like laid up in bed and can't even move yet. So, yeah,
no,
I mean,
he traveled around the world and brought presents to all the kids. So that's something.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, you're not going down all those chimneys if you're going to be out until March. So that's for sure. But I just want to talk about the top six real quick. I'm not going to hide from this. I mean, before the season, even right now, like, I would say Morgan Geekie would be not in my top six on a championship roster, right? I think he would be comfortably, a third liner if he's playing his game. Okay. Well, we know the Bruins don't have a perfect roster, so he's in the top six. So with that said, I think that line has been playing really well. And Morgan Geekie in particular, and Bridget, you mentioned his numbers online in December, but his effort level is just night and day from what we saw in the first month and a half of the season. And it's not so much that he probably went out in October, November and said to himself, I'm not going to try. But sometimes the light bulb just goes off and you start feeling good about your game. And his forechecking has been very noticeable. He is creating turnovers. He's creating zone time, and it's leading to production. That first goal in Columbus before the game got out of hand. It's a strong forecheck by Geekie. Takes the body. Pastrnak is right there to pounce on the loose puck. Again, just playing on your toes, knowing what you're going to do when the play happens in front of you. And then he finds, Pastrnak moves his feet and gets behind the net and just keeps his feet moving and finds Zacha across the goal mount for that pass. And it was a great play. And you just see them starting to click as well a little bit here. Is it the ideal top six personnel wise? I don't think any of us would say it is, but it's what the reality is right now. And they're playing well. And Scott, I think earlier you mentioned Charlie Coyle is he's starting to get some looks too, playing with Lindholm and Marchand. And so that kind of, is why we were talking a lot about the third line before, because that seems to be the one line that's, just not doing much of anything outside of that Lysell, Brazeau play. But just you guys' opinions on the top six, how they're looking right now.
Well, yeah, Geeky has 10 points in December. He's got 6 goals, 4 assists. There's still 1 game left in December, so his stats could end up a little bit differently by the end of the month. But last game pouncing on a turnover and ripping it. Like, he's got a good long distance shot, which we've talked about before. He's got just a good shot in general. And the chemistry seems to be there. The second line chemistry seems to be there. There was a play last night that I noticed, like, they knew exactly where they were on, especially on the rush. Like, sometimes that's when you really see the chemistry, like knowing where the guy wants the puck. Like, you're trying to set up a scoring chance, catch, maybe with catching them with fewer guys back or whatever. And I watched one of them, I think it was Lindholm, skates in with the puck, drops it to Coyle, like makes a break for the opposite side. Like, all three of them, and Marchand goes far post, and they almost scored. Like, all three of them seem to know exactly where the other one wants to go, where, how to pass it to them where they can get a good shot off. And the chemistry has certainly built, I would say, on both lines. And the numbers have gone up, like I mentioned with Geeky, but Coyle scored in the first night of the back-to-back. Marchand had an 11-game point streak going, which broke because even though the Bruins scored 4 goals, Marchand didn't factor in on any of them. So he, that ends at 11 games for him, which is still very impressive. He's had a great month of December. I don't know. I like the look of both of those lines. And Scott, you were commenting on this when we were up on the 9th floor yesterday. People were tweeting at you, or I think, right, they were tweeting at you that, why isn't Lysell in the top 6? It's like, the top 6 is actually doing pretty well right now. He fits best on that third line right now. I don't see an issue with him coming in and playing on the third line, especially because why would you break up 2 lines that, not every night, but most nights look decent together and have chemistry?
Yeah, I mean, like, if you wanted to put Lysell in the second line and put Coyle at third line center, like, I would be okay with that. But to your point, like, Marchand, Lindholm, Coyle have looked pretty good together so far. And as I said earlier, like, Sacco's using that as kind of his matchup defensive line, and that changes if Lysell's there. Like, that's no longer how you're using that line. So, but yeah, Geeky's playing great. I think his chemistry with Pastrnak in particular also shows up on support plays where, like, I noticed it several times Saturday night where it was like Pastrnak would have the puck and obviously be under pressure because teams always throw 2 guys at him. And, like, Geeky was just in the perfect spot to give Pastrnak an outlet, or even to clean up, like, Pastrnak getting the puck poked away. He was just, like, right there to help out. So I think you also see it there in addition to the transition. Some low plays in the offensive zone. I think that line's been pretty good. So, yeah, like Sacco told us, like, Geeky is the guy going to the net on that line and providing kind of that presence. And he's done that well. I also think he's just doing even much more than that. Yeah, the people tweeting at me about Lysell, like, we might be too late in the pod for me to go on this rant, but it, like, I just get a kick out of I just get a kick out of, like, the fans who think every time, like, they bring up a prospect, he should just be, like, handed a spot on the line with David Pastrnak. And I'm like, why? Like, what? How does that work? Like, why would you just hand a kid that spot in his first game? And by the way, that also means throwing him into the toughest matchups. It's like, there is nothing wrong with starting him on the third line and seeing if he can work his way up from there. Like, there's nothing wrong with limiting his minutes in his first NHL game. It's just, I think there's just this section of Bruins fans that think, like, Lysell, Poitras, and Merkulov should, like, all be in the top 6 playing 17 minutes a night. And it's like, guys, like this isn't how it works. They're not a rebuilding team. They're not just gonna give minutes to kids and like let them make mistakes out there.
So let me ask you guys this question, because it kind of leads into what I was going to ask, which is, and Bridget, I'm going to get ahead of your response. If I was the GM or the coach, I wouldn't be on this podcast, but I'm going to ask it anyway, which is, how would you guys handle right now this logjam of Poitras continuing to produce down in Providence and rounding out his game? You have Lysell up right now, and then we talked about some of the struggles of other players. What would you be doing right now to try to optimize the lineup? And Scott, because I feel like, to play devil's advocate, I feel like maybe some people are thinking what you said earlier, which is Trent Frederic is an anchor right now, and it's not the best position to let somebody showcase what they can do when you're putting him in his NHL debut with Trent Frederic, who's playing some of the worst hockey of his career. So maybe it's like, put offensive-minded players with like-minded players and see what they can do. But I understand starting on the third line. I'm just trying to maybe look at other people's points of view.
Yeah, and like that's fair, but I think so I guess what I would say is, like, here is where criticism would be fair. If Fabian Lysell goes right back down and it's like, oh, well, that third line didn't do much, I think it would be unfair to blame that on Fabian Lysell if Trent Frederic is still playing like this. Like, that 100% would be a fair criticism of how the Bruins handle this situation. But can we wait to see if they do that before we rip them for it? Like, they haven't done that yet. So, okay, if Fabian Lysell gets sent down on Sunday or Monday and Trent Frederic is still centering the third line on Tuesday, then great. Well, yeah, let's all get together and rip them. But let's see, like, maybe you give it another game and that line does a little better. Again, they did score a goal. They scored the opening goal Saturday, so it's not like they did absolutely nothing. Like, they scored. That's a start. So maybe you give them a chance to see if they can do a little more, or maybe they do realize that Trent Frederic's the issue and he gets benched for a game here at some point in these next few games. Like, it, let's see how they handle it from here. If it looks like they're just going to scapegoat Fabian Lysell for Trent Frederic's problems, great, rip away. But that hasn't happened yet. So, like, let's see.
I think that your question too, Brian, is about like what to do with Poitras. I had someone comment on one of my tweets, like, what does Poitras have to do? Walk on water? Like, how is he going to get this call if he's playing so well? Like, and he really is, right?
I mean, technically they're all walking on water if you think about it.
Okay. No, Scott, no. Okay, I'm not going to give you that one. And and so, point being, like, Poitras has done everything you can. I mean, he has more goals in Providence than Lysell has all season, and he's played like 8 or 9 fewer games, and he's been on a tear, and he scored again Saturday, and it is true. Like, could he be a more effective center right now on the third line than Trent Frederic? Yeah, he could. But the issue currently is that they would have to waive someone. Maybe that's McLaughlin, maybe that's I don't know, maybe it's Wahlstrom. Like, there's options. But I mean, could he be more effective than Frederick right now? Yeah. But do you want to put both of those guys on the same line in the NHL? Like, that becomes a pretty small line. It becomes a line where two younger guys might get targeted. They might not be the best defensively. Like, Frederick, at least defensively, is pretty sound, and he gets back and he knows how to play center, like good defensive center. So he does have that, where, like, you maybe create a little bit of a defensive liability with that. Like, Brazo's not that fast to get back. Poitras still has some things to work on defensively in his game, and so does Lysell. So that's that's the real drawback, I think.
So those are all fair. Let's address them one at a time. Okay, so if you were to call up Poitras, because I think there's a lot of people, myself included, Poitras and Lysell, they clicked a little bit down in Providence. They're both younger players that have a lot to offer, theoretically. And like we've talked about, there's very underwhelming performances in Boston's lineup at times this year, and Trent Frederic notably. Okay, so if you bring up Poitras in the first place, okay, you guys mentioned you might have to waive McLaughlin or Wahlstrom or whatever. And to that, I would say I like Mark McLaughlin. I probably won't get invited to the McLaughlins and Scott's Thanksgivings next year if I say this. And Wahlstrom is a project too, but
that's tough for you. You're gonna miss out on chicken bites
from Augustus. Damn.
Yeah.
So what I would say to that is I like McLaughlin, and I think he's been a good soldier, and when he's coming to Boston, I've liked his game. But if you're talking about it's the casualty of trying to see what you have in Poitras and Lysell from an organizational standpoint, I think you have to do the scale there, and I think the reward would be worth the risk of potentially losing McLaughlin to waivers, which I'm not even sold that you would. And Wahlstrom, he wasn't a Boston Bruin 2 weeks ago, so don't be too concerned about losing him if you send him to waivers. So I would say if you have to bring up Poitras and that means waiving somebody, I think everybody here should be okay with that. And to the other points you made, Bridget, I agree with you. I think that it's a light line. It's a young line. But what I would say is this: try it for a game. One game over 82 shouldn't bury the team's chances at making the playoffs if it doesn't work out. And if it doesn't work out early and often, how many times have we seen the Bruins, mix and match lines to get through a game, or put a line on, make that line the fourth line for the night, give them 8 minutes, just survive the game. I think it's worth seeing if that makes any sense.
The problem is that when you call up Poitras, like, you want to get him regular playing time. So it's not like you're going to go back and forth with scratching like Frederick and then Poitras and you know what I mean? Like, you want him to be getting a lot of time. Like, he's not the guy that you call up to, occasionally like McLaughlin. Like, you're not going to handle him the way that you handle a call up like McLaughlin. So you kind of have to have your longer term idea in mind when you call him up, because he's going to get the playing time, because otherwise you're doing him a disservice, because he could be getting those looks in Providence. Totally
agree. But so do put Frederick with Lysell and Poitras, right? And then put put Brazeau with them, or Frederick. Let's say it's Frederick. Keep Frederick on the third line wing. Okay. Maybe Brazeau goes down to the fourth line and you bench Koepke. Like, whatever. You know what I mean? I know, but he's been quiet ever since he was Wayne Gretzky for the first week of the season. He's come back down he's been fine. I'm not saying he's been bad, but you could scratch him if you need to.
Yeah, he didn't have points in the 10 previous games. No points.
Yeah. So, Bridget, you mentioned having kind of a longer term plan, and I actually think the kind of maybe 5-game plan or something like that at this point is Poitras probably stays in Providence a little longer. And the reason I think that is because I think this is kind of going to be a piecemeal approach, where I think they want to see what they have in Lysell, and he'll probably be on some different line combinations, especially if things aren't really clicking with Frederick and Brazeau, another game or two. But I think they probably want to see okay, is Lysell going to stick around? Because if he is, then we figure out, okay, is there also a spot for Poitras? What's the best way to use both of them if they're both going to be here? Or you give Lysell, however many games you want to give him, 3, 4, 5. And maybe he doesn't really stick, and then the switch is just Poitras comes up, Lysell goes back. I think these are probably a 2-step process here, where I don't think you're going to see Poitras and Lysell together right away. Now, maybe they call Poitras up on Monday, and I look dumb for thinking this, but that's kind of my guess at this, because I would also say, again, while, I'm not saying Mark McLaughlin is any sort of decisive factor in this conversation. If you were planning on calling Poitras up in the next couple days, I would think you probably don't play Mark McLaughlin on Saturday. You send him back to Providence while you can still do it without needing waivers. So the fact that he stuck around and got that 10th game makes me think that they don't plan on immediately making another move. Again, maybe that's a wrong read of this, but that's where my mind's at.
Yeah, you don't think they want to do too much too soon. They
Yeah.
they want to take a more layered approach, and I think that makes sense as well. I think maybe the reason why you want to see Poitras up as soon as possible is because you're just seeing certain individuals just not perform, and you kind of want to humble them a little bit. But I think that probably does make the most sense, Scott. And as far as why they brought up Lysell over Poitras, do you think it was just a matter of Poitra's hot, he's doing really well, allow him to keep getting his confidence? Doesn't hurt to have him down there for a few more games, and let's reward Fabian for not just a strong game, but being in the system for 3 years. And maybe this allows it to no longer be a talking point, right? They've never called up Lysell. Well, here it is. And now that's kind of a monkey off the back moment for the organization too.
Yeah, I think that's definitely probably part of it. Like, I think they had a longer term plan for Poitras down in Providence all along, where it was like, I think we all kind of thought initially, like, oh, could this maybe just be a couple games and he's back? Well, no, clearly they wanted him to get actual time down in the AHL, and there's like things that they want him to work on, especially conditioning wise, endurance wise, taking on more minutes, playing in more situations, all that stuff. That I think they said, like, all right, this is going to be a month plus, maybe even longer than that. And you might just be at the point where you're starting to feel better about that, and you look and you say, okay, he is in better shape, and if he comes back up, he will be able to hold up better. But I also think they're just not in a rush there. Like, I think if it's another couple weeks, maybe even another month, like, I think they're just fine with that, unless something gets so dire up in Boston that it's like, no, we need him back up because we just need him, period. Like, the team's not playing well enough. Right now, they're winning enough games. They're in a playoff spot. I don't think they're really worried about seeding right now. Like, yes, you want to win games, you want to play well, all that stuff. Like, I'm not saying like everything's sunshine and rainbows right now and there's nothing to worry about. There is. We've been talking about it for an hour and 15 minutes. But it's not like they're in danger of missing the playoffs at this exact moment. So they can actually afford to be patient, even though, a lot of fans don't want them to be.
Yeah, I mean, and just like talk about a few quick positives before we sign off, because we've been talking for a while. They in the beginning of the season were playing terrible at home. They're playing much better at home. The crowds are into it. The fan base is back. Like, the conversation that I hear is not like, oh, I'm so stupid for buying season tickets. Like, I should just sell them. Like, it's more people are having fun at the games again, and that's encouraging to see. They've been playing better under Sacco, and I don't even want to have the conversation about Montgomery, like, was it his fault? Because that's, we're past that point. Like, the fact is that they look better under Sacco. The results are better under Sacco. They're back in a position where they're, they can make do in the standings and find ways to win and stick with the pack, because the East doesn't have extreme depth that's going to concern them, especially the Metro, guys. What the hell is going on with the Metro? But besides Washington, who is your next game? But who you also beat right before the break. So can you do that? Tough game. It's at 12:30 on New Year's Eve. So it's really early. I'm happy it's not in Boston. I'm happy I can just watch it on my TV, because I don't like noon games or 1 games having to try to get to the Garden like 3 hours early, and I want to sleep, guys. And yeah, so we'll be recording after that too. But there's positives. The Bruins haven't lost at home in the entire month of December, and I don't know. There's certainly things that have, if we just put it in perspective, as from where they were in October, November to where they are now, they're better off now.
There's absolutely positives. You just mentioned them, Bridget. I mean, their structure is better for the most part. They their top six has been going more so, but for me, the three biggest issues is their special teams, both of them, and then their lows are too low, and they're too frequent still. So like they have to be able to find ways. You hear it all the time. Good teams have to be able to find ways to win with their C game. And right now, I don't think the Bruins have much of a C game. They have a B plus game and they have like an F game. And so they just have to find, they have to be more versatile in the way that they can win hockey games. And I'm not saying that has to be the case in October, November, or December, but as you build towards the postseason in the second half of the year, these are some of the improvements that we need to see from them. So in addition to the positives that you said have started to spring up, those are the next ones that I'll be watching.
And goaltending can be more consistent.
Yeah,
goaltending can be better. Like, I know it's crazy. It sounds crazy to say after a shutout, but like Swayman made 18 saves. He wasn't tested all that much. Like, especially compared to the last 2 years, like goaltending has, has some room to grow. So that's probably another area as well.
Yeah, that they can't win games that open up right now. Like, if a game starts to go up, down, or it's going to be a shootout, like they're going to get shot because they can't do a shootout right now. Like, they have to keep games low scoring, tight checking, and like that's going to be their identity. That's what we thought their identity was coming into the season. It's a tough way to play for 82 games. Like, it's not the most fun. It demands discipline of guys, and I think that's why when they've gone away from it, things look so bad. Is like they're just not built to, right now at least, to win that other way where things get loosey goosey and you pull out a 5-4, 6-5 game. Like they're not one of those teams right now.
Right, and think about the teams that win Stanley Cups. Think about the Bruins in 2011. That team could beat you 1-0. They could beat you 7-6. Like you just have to. You have to be able to do it all. Florida does it. Tampa did it in years prior. It's what you have to do because the NHL is it's just too unpredictable night to night. So they have to be more like water, right? You pour water into any sort of container, it fills up the shape it takes. Like the Bruins have to be able to play any style. And right now they can only, their success is only coming when they kind of just bottle things up and suffocate teams and maybe find a way to get a goal or two. And that's fine. But you have to be able to do it in other ways. You just do. Even if the postseason is more tight checking. But anyway, any final takeaways from you guys? It's been a long episode, believe it or not. It's been two Columbus games.
I was gonna mention when Bridget mentioned Tuesday being a 12:30 game. Great day of hockey because you also have USA Canada World Junior game that night.
Mm-hmm.
How about Latvia?
Yeah, huge upset. Latvia beating Canada in a shootout. What did their goalie made like 50-something saves in that game?
Yeah.
And then plus stopped every shootout attempt. Like
8 attempts in the shootout.
Yeah.
And then Latvia played the Americans tough on a back-to-back. They played them tough, especially the first period and a half. Obviously they were kind of like bottling the middle of the ice.
There was a goalie change. There was a goalie change too, right? Like they didn't. I believe it was the U.S. ran into a different goalie, which probably helped. But yeah, no, I love watching the World Juniors. We're probably about to sign off and go watch another game
US
right
Finland.
now. Yeah, I mean, it's just rolls through the day. Like I was just getting ready for the Bruins yesterday, watching Czech Republic against Kazakhstan, that was something.
Kazakhstan hang in there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Real close one. 14-2 or whatever the hell it was. Yeah. I feel bad. I feel bad.
They need Trinidad and Tobago.
It's like get Jamaica in there. Yeah. This is what
Iceland.
Happens.
Iceland.
Yeah. No, that's what happens when Russia's not allowed to play for obvious reasons. But like you're like, all right, we'll just throw see Kazakhstan, see if we got anything going over there, and bring them in.
All right, Bridget Scott. I think that'll do it for this episode. So yeah, we have the Capitals at 12:30 on New Year's Eve, and be expecting be expecting what better way to start the 2025 calendar year than listening to an episode of the Skate Podcast. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
And we'll be talking to you soon. So thank you all for listening. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.